There's an old story about Shmerel. After working for others for many, many years, he finally decides he wants to go into business for himself. He wants to sell tchotchkes. And he figures he'll sell them for 99 cents each, and he's convinced they're going to fly off the shelf. He's excited. He tells his wife, Sadie, about his plans. And she says to him, Shmerel, are you a meshugana? How can you make money selling tchotchkes for 99 cents when they cost you $1 each? Don't worry, says Shmerel. Don't worry, I'll make it up in volume. I thought about Shmerel because it was 1 week before Rosh Hashanah that I found myself in a very large retail store. And I was there to purchase some important item for our sound system. It wasn't a very expensive item, but it wasn't cheap either, and so I did my research. And out of dozens and dozens and dozens of different brands and models, I finally decided on one. I'm in the store, and I approached the counter to tell the salesman what I wanted. And at that very moment, a gentleman cuts ahead of me. And he's carrying a bag, and he says to the salesman, I have something I'd like to sell you. They're brand new, never used. He takes out from the bag not one, but two of the precise item that I was looking for. And they started haggling over the price. He said he wanted this much, and the salesman offered so much, and they couldn't come to an agreement. So I'm thinking maybe this could be divine providence. Did I hear a voice say, Chazin, why pay retail? So I asked the salesman, would you mind if I made an offer to the gentleman? He said, sure, by all means, go ahead. And I did, and he accepted it. But then it occurred to me, what if this is not heaven looking out for me? Maybe it's rather a heavenly test. Now, I never took an art history class in college, but I've heard the term and I know the concept called provenance. It refers to where an item comes from and who owned it previously. And since this gentleman was very, very vague about how he had come to possess these items, I paused to consider the provenance. And so I wondered, is this providence or is this a test? I've been thinking about this incident and about how all of life is indeed a test. We are tested every single day in one way or another. When we think of tests, for many of us, what immediately comes to mind are the kinds we sat for in school. Exams in mathematics, in history, in science. Those were not necessarily pleasant experiences. Long hours of study, for me anyway, cramming all-nighters. In fact, I did a Google search, and it turned up the interesting fact that one of the most common dreams people have is showing up for an exam unprepared. Has anyone ever had that dream? The one where you haven't studied enough, or you didn't attend the classes, or you even forgot that you were taking the class and now you're taking the test. I've had that dream on more than one occasion over the years. I suspect some of you indeed have. Psychologists suggest that the reason why this dream is so common is that it reflects what's going on in our actual lives. We may feel unprepared for what's coming next. We may lack confidence regarding the future, or maybe some regrets about the past. It's an unpleasant dream, but it could be useful in awakening us to better prepare for the challenges that lie ahead. Life's tests come in all sizes. There are big ones and little ones. What's a little one? Am I patient with my spouse and children? Do I lose my temper too easily? Do I refrain from gossiping about others when it's so tempting to do so? Do I help out around the house or leave the chores for others? So let me share a story. Rabbi Mordechai Gifter was a prominent rabbi of the 20th century, the head of a well-known yeshiva in Cleveland. And a young couple once came to him for counseling. And the wife complained, "My husband spends most of the day in study and he won't take out the trash. He says that as a Torah scholar, he believes it's beneath his dignity to do so." So she asked the rabbi if there was any source whatsoever in Jewish law that would compel him to help out. The rabbi considered the matter, and then he concluded that while the husband should in fact help his wife, there was no religious or legal obligation for him to actually throw out the garbage. The very next morning, early before services, Rabbi Gifter showed up at the house. The young man was startled but also overjoyed. "Rabbi, please, what an honor, come in." No, said Rabbi Gifter. "This is not a social visit. I've just come to take out the trash. You may believe it's beneath your dignity, but it's not beneath mine." The young man had obviously failed that very basic test, but rest assured, in his dramatic fashion, Rabbi Gifter showed him the correct path. Rolling up your sleeves and even getting your hands a little dirty is not beneath one's dignity. That was a small test, but an important one. And then there are the bigger ones. We have all been tested this year and a half. Would we be able to take care of ourselves and our families? Could we deal with the stresses of quarantines, of masks, of protecting our health? But would we also reach out to others, to neighbors, to fellow congregants, to those in the community who might need a helping hand? Everyone in our society was tested. Some made sure to stock up on toilet paper, while others brought food and comfort to those who could not themselves get out of the house. I know many in our community who during these past months have displayed such kindness and generosity. They were tested, and they inspired us as exemplars of chesed. Chesed means loving kindness. So permit me a plug. In recent months, we've attempted to reinvigorate our Beth Or B'Torah Chesed group. You get the opportunity to be part of a group that makes a phone call or makes a visit or does some small act of kindness that will really make a difference, an important difference in someone's life. It's something each and every one of us can do, so I want to invite you right now to join that group. You can call or email me after the Chag. we can all pass that test. There's a very interesting and well-known story in the Talmud. Rabbi Chia bar Abba Chalash. Rabbi Chia bar Abba fell ill. His teacher, Rabbi Yochanan, went to him and said, "Tell me, is your suffering dear to you? In other words, do you desire to be ill and afflicted?" And Rabbi Chia said to him, "I welcome neither the suffering nor its reward." So Rabbi Yochanan said to him, "Give me your hand." Rabbi Chia bar Abba gave him his hand, and Rabbi Yochanan stood him up and restored him to health. The Talmud then goes on to relate that later on, Rabbi Yochanan, the teacher, himself fell ill. And another sage, Rabbi Hanina, entered to visit him and asked him, "Tell me, is your suffering dear to you?" And Rabbi Yochanan said, "I welcome neither the suffering nor its reward." And Rabbi Hanina said to him, "Give me your hand." He gave him his hand, and Rabbi Hanina stood him up and restored him to health. Many like to cite this portion of Talmud because it goes on to ask, why did Rabbi Yochanan have to wait for Rabbi Hanina to restore him to health? If he had the power to heal his student, why could he not simply have healed himself? And then the Talmud answers, a prisoner cannot free himself from prison. In other words, you may be able to work wonders for others, but that does not mean you can do so for yourself. You need others to help you. That is the gist of the lesson of this portion of Talmud, but that is not why I bring it up this morning. Because for me, the more interesting question is, what exactly did the rabbis mean when they asked, "Is your suffering dear to you?" How can suffering be dear? Of course they wanted to be healed. Who wishes to suffer? And what is the reward for suffering that they were talking about? Nobody wishes to suffer. Nobody wants pain in life, but perhaps there is, after the fact, something to be gained from affliction. Perhaps it can cause us to become a little more empathetic. Perhaps it can strengthen our ability to be more compassionate. Perhaps it has the potential to make us deeper on some level, in some way to grow our soul. And this is the real question. Would we really want a life in which we were never tested? A life that is totally devoid of any pain, any disappointment, any failure? I do not think that is the case. We don't seek the difficulties in life, the times that make us sad, those that bring us grief, but they come nevertheless. And our task is to make certain that the afflictions we are tested with change us in a way that makes us better and makes our lives more meaningful. We all want happy lives, but as important, just as important, we all want meaningful lives. Not only are individuals tested, societies and nations are tested as well. We just commemorated the 20th anniversary of the 9/11 tragedy. If there has been one positive theme that has been expressed over and over and over again in recent days, it is that the tragedy tested this nation and brought out the best in us. Many, many individuals rose to the occasion, like those on United Airlines Flight 93. Mark Bingham, Todd Beamer, Tom Burnett, Jeremy Glick, and others who with the greatest courage rose up to try to overtake the terrorists. In meeting the ultimate test, they surely saved countless lives of those who were intended to be victims at the nation's capital. Michael Horan was tested too. He watched with horror that day, and he experienced the mix of emotions. There was disbelief and panic, but there was also a desire to help and connect. So for the next month and a half, he operated a kosher soup van on behalf of his company, and he served 400 kosher meals each day to firefighters, police officers, and volunteer first responders who were at ground zero. And then there was Peter Gansey Jr. Gansey was a former member of the Army's 82nd Airborne Division, and he joined the New York City Fire Department in 1968 and rose to become chief of the department, the highest ranking uniformed member of the NYFD. On the morning of September 11, 2001, he was on his way to jury duty. He was then alerted that a plane had crashed into the North Tower of the World Trade Center. He rushed over to set up a command center close by, just in time to see the second plane hit the South Tower. Gansey and his colleagues were in the basement of the South Tower when it collapsed. The dust seared their lungs. They described it as inhaling glass, yet they managed to dig themselves out of the rubble that had fallen on them. Realizing that the North Tower would also soon collapse, Gansey ordered an immediate evacuation of everyone. But then he heard on the radio the cries of trapped and injured firefighters. Gansey had been tested many times during his career, and this was his greatest test. He did not hesitate, and he personally went to try to save his trapped men. He was killed when the North Tower collapsed at 10:28 a.m. It was said of him that he would never ask anyone to do something he wouldn't do himself. It surprised no one that he was at the front lines, and it surprised no one that he sacrificed himself to help his fellow firefighters. As did all of those who heroically climbed up the burning tower that day. They were all brave, and they all went to rescue those who were trapped in the inferno, and all of them were tested on that day, and they gave their lives. They gave their lives in that test. It's unlikely that any one of us will face these kinds of tests in our lives. Ours are going to be easier and much, much simpler. But each one of us has an opportunity to look into our own soul, to ask, who am I? What do I believe? What do I value most? And how do I wish one day to be remembered? Remembering is the essence of Yizkor. We pray that God will remember our loved ones. We remember how they lived their lives. We know the legacies that they bequeathed to us. We cherish their memories as one day others will cherish ours. How we lived our lives, the choices we made, the legacies we will bequeath to them. Let us all welcome the challenges that we face. Let us face each test, the big ones and the small ones, with a clear mind, a brave heart, and a generous spirit. In that way, our lives will be a blessing for those we love and for the generations yet to come. Gemar Chatima Tova, may we all be sealed in the book of life for a year of good health and blessings, and let us all say Amen.